Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and confidence coach, Anna Manning, and today we're talking about how to be a confident ally at work. I've got some very special guests who are going to be joining me, and I will let them introduce themselves. But we're going to be talking about what it is to be an ally within our workplace, within our organizations, and what is the role of allies and allyship. And we're thinking about it as part of a holistic response to building greater diversity and inclusion within our workplaces. So, we're going to touch on what are the benefits of allyship to you, to your organizations, and how do you actually do it? So, how do you actually become an ally? What steps do you actually take? How do you practice it in your workday? And we're also going to touch on what might stop you from doing it. So, what are people's concerns and considerations when they're thinking about being an ally? What do they worry about? So that you, hopefully, by the end of today's episode, have some real practical ideas and thoughts that you can take away and implement in your workplace, or even get involved in what's already happening so that you can be a confident ally. So, without further ado, I'll let my guests introduce themselves. So, welcome everybody to the podcast, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do. So, Maura, why don't you start?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Moira Slape. I'm the Chief People Officer of Travers Smith, which is a UK-based city law firm. I've been here 8.5 years, and my role is to lead the people function, work very closely with the board in driving our people strategy forward. My background is very much in learning and development and human resources. So I've been in that profession all of my career. And for the last 24 years, I've worked in the legal sector. This is my fourth law firm and hopefully my last, assuming Travers Smith will keep me. A lot of the time that I am working with partners, I'm very aware, acutely aware of the role that they have as leaders within the business, as well as actually doing the law. And so a lot of the aspects around allyship, particularly, we talk at length to our partners about the importance of allyship and so on. I'm sure that will be something that we'll all sort of collectively bring to life. I also sit on our D&I board and a part of our partnership board as well. So a lot of my time is spent with partners, helping and advising and influencing and so on.
Great. Good to have you with us. And Anya.
Hi, I'm Anya Barrero. I'm a partner at Brown Jacobson Solicitors. My day job really is to be a commercial legal advisor to government. As well as that, I am very heavily involved in the D&I work and strategy at Brown Jacobson. So I co-lead two of our D&I committees, the Gender Equity Working Group and the Working Families Group, and try and play a very active role as being an ally within the firm. Very conscious of my position as a leader in the firm and wanting to make sure that I walk the walk in terms of improving this sort of embedding of DE&I in our firm, which, to be fair, is doing loads of really great stuff. It's a firm that really passionately believes in the inclusion and diversity agenda and does a lot, but there's always more to be done. And when I'm not doing all of that, I'm also the mother of a 7-year-old daughter.
Yeah, it sounds like you're having fun in all areas of your life, Anya.
Absolutely.
And Katie.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast, Anna. So I'm Katie Winstanley, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm really proud to be an inclusion and diversity manager at the House of Commons. We support thousands of staff who make Parliament happen. So everything from clock maintenance professionals to cleaners, to security, to legislative advisors. So a real range of people. And within that role, I lead on our inclusion and diversity strategy, our inclusion analyses, and support people in their teams with the particular challenges they're going through. And I also bring to the podcast my own lived experiences. I'm very open about those. So I'm queer, I'm neurodivergent, I'm a woman, I grew up in a social mobility cold spot in the north of England. So I bring all of that with us here today in this space. So yeah, really pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Katie, and all of you. So we're going to have a conversation today about allyship. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this on the podcast was I think it's an important thing for us to think about, but it's an important thing for us to talk about as well. What does it mean to be an ally, and why should we do it? And I think that we need confidence at times to be an ally and to do the work that an ally does. So that's why it's really pertinent for us to think about it on this podcast, because we're thinking about all aspects of confidence at work. And I think this is an area where some people don't feel as confident as they might. And I think for a lot of people that I've spoken to, they're thinking about being an ally. What does it mean? How do they do it? They might be at the beginning of a journey. And that's why I wanted to bring people together to think about it and to talk about it today. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're thinking, okay, great, but I'm not exactly sure what an ally is, I went back to the dictionary definition, which says a person or organization that supports the rights of a marginalized group without being a member of it. So we could think about all kinds of, marginalized groups, whether that's to do with race, whether it's to do with gender, whether it's to do with age, whether it's to do with neurodiversity, disability, social class. There's loads of marginalized identities that we're going to find within our workplaces. And when we're thinking about being an ally, it's supporting those people who hold that marginalized identity or have various marginalized identities without being a member of that group. And I wanted to ask you guys on the podcast, how do you think about allyship? What does it mean to you? How do you define it?
I'm happy to start. I think I define it as using the privilege that I have as a white straight woman with a good education and being, relatively senior in the business, using that privilege to amplify voices of people who are from marginalized backgrounds, who have different characteristics to me, and giving them a platform and a voice that they might struggle to have heard so clearly otherwise.
Yeah, and I to add to that, I see it as opportunities for people to, including myself, educate oneself on the issues that people who are in minority groups to understand the issues that they can face, not that they will face, but that they can face and they may face. And then how does that sort of intersect with society more broadly? So I see it very much as a educational opportunity that we have to better understand people, why they say what they say, why they dress, why they wear what they wear, caveated by, to your point about confidence, Anna, we might not always get it right, and we might not always say the right thing. And I think being brave about that or courageous about that is also okay, because sometimes things just come out the wrong way, or you're not educated as well as you could be. So for me, allyship is about a definition of people learning and better understanding about people.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love how people have spoken about this in terms of the use of one's voice. I think with allyship, I think a lot of people think that first you just need to be really loud, but actually I think being quiet is one of the most amazing things that you can do as an ally, and just listening, observing, and really putting yourself in spaces where you can hear about lived experiences and responding to them appropriately. And then once you've had that education, I guess it's about looking for ways to really amplify those voices that you've heard, using your privileges to help others to rise. And yeah, I think allyship is it's small actions that everyone can take, and it's a consistent approach, I think, to building a more inclusive workplace. It's a everyday activity rather than just a mindset.
Thank you. And I love the way you were talking about hearing other people's experiences and learning about other people's experiences. And part of the reason that I wanted to do this podcast was because as a coach, I spend a lot of time sitting with people and listening to their experiences, and often they're good experiences and sometimes they're not so good experiences. And they can be difficult things for people to share, difficult things for people to talk about, and difficult things sometimes for people to be open about in our workplaces. So it seems that if we have more people that are willing to do that work of being an ally or take on that role of being an ally, that might become easier for people over time. So I wanted to talk a bit about what you see as the role of allies and allyship And that might be within your organizations or within the wider world. And I was looking at it in terms of part of a holistic response to building diversity and inclusion within our workplaces. Obviously, there's work to be done on all different levels, and this feels like an important part of that. But what do you see as the role of allies or allyship within your spheres or within your organizations?
Shall I go first, Hannah? I thought about this quite a lot actually, and I don't have many words for this other than sort of the promotion of an inclusive atmosphere. I use that word deliberately, not culture, but an atmosphere that can just drive feelings of mutual support. I just see it in a very simple way, really. And I was also thinking about how, to use the word privilege that has been used already, because potentially we are in those situations, thinking about the atmosphere that we have a responsibility to try and nurture so that people from a minority can feel that they can be themselves in the workplace. And we have horror stories, don't we, where we know that that doesn't happen all the time. Maybe we'll come on to that, I don't know. But it's simple things that can go badly wrong that last forever. And I think that we have a responsibility, you know, in allyship to think about the atmosphere that we collectively can contribute to. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I'd really agree with that, Moira, and I think just sort of building on that a bit, when we're thinking about sort of creating that atmosphere, that I guess sort of that sense of belonging, I think it's incumbent on all of us who see ourselves as allies to be honest about our own experiences as well, and not in a way that is sort of really about ourselves at all, but actually, if we've had experiences where we felt in some way marginalized or things have been tricky, I think it's the honesty point that encourages people to then be honest about their own experiences. So if I say, yeah, I had last year was very hard for me because, some rubbish things happened at work and I felt very stressed about it. And it's not about me asking people for sympathy, but it's about me saying, yeah, I found that hard, but I'm sharing that with you so that you can sort of understand maybe where I was coming from last year, and just creating that sense that then when other people are feeling that they are not being listened to, or things are particularly hard for them for one reason or another, they also feel the ability to be able to share those experiences honestly and know that they will be listened to, and sort of expect that kind of reciprocal listening as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes you hear things, maybe if you're a close colleague with someone, or if you know somebody well, people can sometimes talk about things in hushed tones. This thing happened to me, or I felt like this, or I heard that. I'm not sure in my working life I've heard that modeled so readily in more open forums. But Katie, you were going to say something there.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you spend a lot of time in inclusion and diversity spaces, particularly like I do obviously in my inclusion and diversity role, I think you hear these things all the time, and you hear these lived experiences spoken very honestly within that context, whether it's a network or a private meeting. You hear these things, and it's really crushing to hear people's lived experiences. And I think that's for me what motivates me in my allyship is actually doing something about that, because you can feel so powerless if you aren't responsible for the systemic issues that person's facing. I think the silly metaphor that I always come back to is about carrying the heavy bags for someone and like walking along the road with them on that journey, wherever they're going. They can tell you where the breakables are in the bags, but it's your responsibility to hold them, and to support them and sort of free them up to do other stuff. So I think for me that's a really helpful sort of metaphor of allyship. But yeah, it's all about supporting people and recognizing where you can help and where it's appropriate for you to do so. But cultivating that honest culture is absolutely vital in an organization. You've got to have spaces where that's encouraged and where people feel they can just really come authentically to work.
And that leads me on to the next point that I wanted to talk about, which was, what do you think then? And you've already touched on this a little bit, and I'm going to come back to you, Katie. The benefits of allyship and of creating this atmosphere that Moira talked about, of people being able to be honest and people being allies for one another. What do you think the benefits of that are, and what do you hope will be achieved if there is a promotion of being an ally and a commitment to that within organizations?
Yeah, I think fundamentally you can summarize it as it speeds the process up. The more of us that we have on this project, the more of us that we have on this lifelong commitment to making things better in terms of inclusion and diversity, the better, the quicker things are going to happen. And I think that's something that comes up a lot in our work. You know, we have people, and I count myself in that. Sometimes you're tired. It's the same conversations that and same challenges that you've been having for years, and you want change and you want it as soon as possible for the benefit of your community and of society at large. So I think for me, it's just the fact that the more of us that work on it, the better, the more perspectives we'll have, and the better we can achieve our aims, really.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think in terms of from a work context, I genuinely believe that we will do better work in our business side of things, delivering services for clients, if the people that we are working with, if our colleagues all feel that they belong, that we're all on the same journey in terms of, you know, growth, etc., from the business perspective, bringing in all of those, everyone, and making sure that everyone feels that they belong, that they can add something to the business is a benefit to the business, and you're working with people who are genuinely happy most of the time to be at work. Nobody's ever going to be happy 100% of the time at work, are we? But people want to come to work and they want to work with their colleagues. I think that's super important from the business perspective, and I think you get better decisions and different decisions the more voices that you bring in. So if you're not, as an ally, sort of encouraging all those different voices to be heard and those perspectives, then you're just missing out on a whole range of experiences which could lead to better decisions. And you know, we're in a world now, aren't we, where things are changing very rapidly, you know, whether it's external global geopolitical circumstances or it's tech, things like AI. We need diverse voices around the table to make sure that we're not missing opportunities, and we're not allowing ourselves to get into bad things like AI, to get into bad habits, if we don't make sure that everyone's voices are heard in those conversations. So I think it's just really important to get to use allyship as a way to make sure that lots and lots of different voices are being heard, and that decisions being made based on a whole load of different experiences and not just a small number.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And this might be sort of a wonkier way of looking at it, Anna, but you know, no organization's perfect. You know, you hear, don't you, the dialogue that comes out from some organization. I don't know that they've been drinking the Kool-Aid, to use that phrase, and you think, really? You serious? So just an acceptance. What I've learned through, you know, the role I do and allyship is that nothing's perfect, and that's okay. And you know, to Anya, your point about, you know, the world that we live in, you know, our clients will feel it. You know, they feel it when we pitch, when our partners go and they pitch for business. I mean, you know, you'll be far closer to that than me, Anya. So they feel it, and they know, and it's that they understand when something's not authentic. And my point being that no organization is perfect, and sometimes things go wrong, and sometimes people say the wrong thing or they act in the wrong way, and you know, that's just life. And so people being more aware of the benefits of allyship, I think, can counteract some of that.
Yeah, and another thing that came to mind then was, we think about and Katie talked about, like, the benefit of speeding things up for the whole of society and changing things, and Anya and Moira, you talked about the benefits to the people in the organization and the work that the organization does. But do you have any personal experience you want to share of what it's been like for you, and has it been, or has it, because people are listening to this episode and thinking, okay, maybe I'm already an ally, but maybe I would think about doing the work of an ally or being an ally to somebody. What has it brought to you? Has there been any personal, not success, that's not the right way of saying it, but has it brought you anything that you would want to share?
I have met more people in my firm because of being an ally, in that I have, people in different bits of the business that I would never work with on a professional level, in terms of, we have very different clients, we have very different work types, but by wanting to learn about experiences of my LGBTQ plus colleagues or my Black and brown colleagues, that actually I've started having conversations and getting to know people that I would not have necessarily come across. Just, we're in different offices, we're in different teams and departments, so it's an amazing way of widening your network of colleagues that and then just actually, learning things about them and about people that you wouldn't have done otherwise. So I think on a personal level of just building relationships and getting to know people, it definitely kind of does that, and helps you, just have a wider network. And I think because of that, and because you're sort of being more curious about different experiences, I think it helps you think differently about things, even if you're not consciously thinking about it from a diversity perspective or an inclusion perspective. It just allows you to just have a different sort of, you become a bit more sort of subconsciously aware of different experiences that may impact on what you're doing.
Yeah, I absolutely love that you were saying, Andrea, about your world expanding, and I can definitely relate to that, having come from, a sleepy small northern town into now a busy city in London, and seeing all of the rich variety of human experiences. I think, allyship is fundamentally not a selfish thing, and it feels a little uncomfortable talking about it as that, but actually it's really good to acknowledge as well that, it does bring you that real sense of satisfaction that you're making a difference in the world. And I think, Emile Durkheim talks about like collective effervescence, that sort of amazing feeling when people come together and share their experiences and just really be very authentically human together, talking about the things that you wouldn't talk to a stranger on the bus about. You only talk about it when you have built a really positive relationship. And I think the working context is a really great space for us to bring in those kind of places like workplace equality networks, or whatever you call them in your organization, to really connect with human beings. And there's no better feeling than that, to really understand people on a deep and personal level. And having the ability to do that in the work context is amazing, and something that I think the portrayal of work doesn't often include the idea that you might get to do things like this as part of your work. It's a privilege.
Yeah, I would echo that. I did your the word that really struck me, Anya, when you were talking, is relationships. And in the job I do, what allyship allows me to do is feel and hear, and help me think about where we may have some blockages in the organization with D&I. So I know I'm in a privileged role to say that. I appreciate that, but I just get intelligence. I build relationships, absolutely, and that's obviously something that I get out of bed to do in the morning. But for the people strategy of a law firm, and you think law firms were quite straightforward, I'm sure Annie will agree, they're not really, because things go wrong, because we're a people business. And so knowing the sort of the essence of what's going on and where things are going wrong is hugely powerful. So myself and my team use allyship two ways: to build relationships and get all the joy and everything and the privilege that you talk about, Katie, that comes out of that. But then we can use it most definitely strategically to think about what needs to be better and celebrate what's going well, because quite often, a lot of the time, things do go well. And so celebrating that and promoting that within the business, and thinking about the best ways to do that help. And from my own perspective, I've been in situations where, I for example, I chose not to have children. So people will say, how old are your children, Moira? I don't have children. I have a stepson. Why didn't you have children? Well, I chose not to. Oh, are you so you must have regretted that then. I'm like, well, this is getting a bit personal, but no, I haven't. Let's talk about that. And then it's a really sort of powerful thing being on the other side of a conversation where people are judging you because you haven't done something that hasn't followed the natural course of humanity or society. And so I share that as a real lived example because that's happened to me quite a lot in my career. And I often use that as sort of a placeholder to try and sort of demonstrate to people how it does feel and how deep that can actually go sometimes. So yeah, a lived experience that still hasn't gone away ever since I'd started work. Fascinating. The assumptions that people make of you and how allyship can be so powerful in unlocking that. Some disclosure there, but anyway, I thought I'd share that.
No, that's really interesting to hear. And as you say, it goes back to that very first point you made, I think, wasn't it, about building trust? That actually, you know, if you're able to have those open conversations, then you're able to just have deeper relationships and more trustful ones than you would have otherwise.
And actually, it also goes to highlight the point that there may be people all around us and in our workplaces who have something which is, for one reason or another, might not be the norm within your organization. And that can go so much wider than we think. Like, I gave a list of things at the beginning. I didn't think of somebody not having children as being one of them. But actually, of course, when we think about family life and mothers at work, we now think about the whole family or people with no children. And there are so many different facets of people and so many assumptions that we all make. But actually, when you talk more about celebrating, because sometimes things are good, I think that's one of the things that I've appreciated about being an ally, or trying to think about being an ally, is that when I hear other people talking about things, or when I see movement on these issues, or people are able to be open, it gives me hope, because I think, yeah, there's loads of things about our societies which are unequal, and there's loads of problems that we still have, and our workplaces are just one reflection of that, really, from wider society. But when I connect with other people, I think, oh yeah, there's other people that care about these things too. It's not just you thinking, oh, we're never going to get equal pay, or people are never just going to accept one another for how they are. Yeah, okay, they're big issues. But it gives me hope that actually one day, if we all stick at it, things can and will change. So that's one of the things I really like about these kinds of discussions. But oh, go on, Katie.
I was just going to say, I think you brought up a really good point there, Anna, about needing to stay doing it. I think this is something I've been thinking about, learning from colleagues who've been in the inclusion and diversity space for a long time. It can be really draining, and I think something that we forget is the sort of emotional toll that this work can take, and I think allies need to recognize that as well. That absolutely is the case for people who have those lived experiences that we're talking about and the protected characteristics. But I think we also just need to really approach allyship from a place of self-care as well, and really making sure that we recognize the impact that it can have on us. Doing that allows you to do it for longer. If you don't, from the very beginning of your allyship journey, take time to nourish, reflect, go to therapy if you need to go to therapy, whatever it is to help you stay calm and stay present and able to do the work is amazing. But yeah, it's important not to forget that.
Thank you for reminding us. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is about implementing allyship. So how do we actually do it? We've talked about, why it's a good thing for organizations, society, why it's a good thing for individuals, why we might want to do it. But how do we actually do it? How do you see this? So, I mean, you're from different organizations, and the first thing that I wanted to touch on was, what do you think the role is of education, training, the kind of formal aspects of this?
I think there is definitely a place for formal education and training, and certainly at Brown Jacobson, we are in the process of asking everyone to take part in some training around anti-racism and unconscious bias, and thinking about that. And I think it's a good way to start bringing everybody on a journey of allyship to just give them a little bit of an understanding of different people's experiences in a setting where they are more kind of maybe receiving information rather than it's a sort of being a dialogue. But I think that's in the grand scheme of how I think allyship can work and how we do it, I think that's probably a smaller element in my view than the more informal things that go on around that.
I love that. I think it absolutely is an informal process in addition to that formal process. I think it's all about learning, and you really do have to learn on the job when it comes to allyship. I think you need that starting point. You need to hear the theory, you need to hear the understanding. But once it comes to action, you've got to learn, you've got to accept that you'll make mistakes along the way. We have allyship training at the House of Commons and really encourage people to go on that. And we weave it into all of our other different types of training. But yeah, it's the everyday that matters in this field. This is not something that you might come up against once in your life. I don't know, perhaps it's major incident training you're on. That's, it's going to maybe affect you once in your whole existence, but this is something that you can really practice every day. So I think that lived experience and of being an ally is really important to focus on.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. So we've had training and awareness around this. Something that seems to work very well in Travers Smith, I'm sure it's the same for other organizations, is that we have it's gone completely out of my mind, spotlight features, and we have on our intranet a various range of spotlight features, whether it's people who've been out on secondment or people who want to talk about mental health challenges that they've had in Mental Health Week and whatever. And we've sort of had 4 or 5 occasions over the last couple of years where we've had a week dedicated to allyship and reverse mentoring and what have you, and people talking about what it means to them and why they feel it's important. Of course, not everyone in the organization will read all of that, but people that read it like it. We also have trailed sort of booklets, sort of allyship booklets, which we leave in our client suites, our client meeting rooms, and the clients pick them up and look at it and think, oh, that's interesting. And that engages the client in conversation with partners and associates. That seems to have gone down very well. What else do we do? Yeah, so we sort of the other example that we've also sort of implemented, we have something called Coffee with a Colleague, which you don't have to sign up to, but you can if you want. And there's an algorithm that the technology team set up. So you have a meeting invitation that lands in your diary for a particular time when you're free, and you're aligned to have coffee with a colleague in the local Pret or in the staff restaurant or whatever it is. And you might not know this person, you might know them. And if it goes in your diary, you're not really allowed to cancel it. So you go to this meeting for half an hour with this person. You don't really know what you're walking into if you don't know them. And we found that that's really generated a sort of an increased culture of allyship. And people saying, have you ever come across this person? Oh, yeah, I know. Really, I had a fascinating conversation with them. Obviously, we're not breaking people's confidences, but it's become sort of part of the fabric of, how people can meet people that they don't know in the organization. And we found that that's triggered some quite interesting debates and conversations about, the merits of allyship as well. Coffee with a Colleague. It's changed my life.
That's so
it's fascinating. So simple.
Yeah, but I find really interesting what you said, Moira, about it's voluntary to sign up to it,
Yeah.
but once you've signed up to it, it's not optional to then commit to do what you've committed to doing. And because I think one of the things that we struggle with, and I'm sure we're not alone, but at Brown Jacobson is sometimes I feel like, because we hold different events, I'll mention some of them in a second, but there are some times when I feel like you're kind of preaching to the converted, in that the colleagues that turn up to some of these events are already the ones who are very much on board with the issues that are being discussed, and with allyship and with diversity, inclusion, and understanding about different experiences. But then it's you can't force people to do these things. You can't force somebody to want to be an ally, or to want to be kind of curious about different experiences. But actually, that sort of you don't have to sign up to this at all, but if you do, then we kind of expect you to commit
Yeah.
to it. Is I just
Commit
find that
to
a
it.
really interesting and
It's really
really
interesting.
positive way of
Yeah.
sort of saying, yeah, once you're kind of over the threshold, then you've got to kind of walk
Yeah.
through the door. So yeah, that's really
You can
interesting.
move them,
Yeah,
and that
but
happens,
you've
and
got
that happens a lot with me because of the job
yeah,
I do. But you can't just say
yeah,
sorry, can't make that.
yeah,
You know,
no,
so I've had the most
that's really interesting.
amazing conversations with
Yeah,
people that and I just like, oh, really, you know, and because I'm
yeah.
a very nosy person, so I like to ask questions. It's amazing what you find
Yeah,
out.
it's
But
great.
then you build, then you've got, to your
Yeah,
point about relationships, you've just got a relationship with someone else who you,
absolutely.
so it's quite an
Yeah,
interesting.
fascinating.
And it's so frustrating, isn't it, when organisations, you know, we're going to make this mandatory training,
Yeah,
still people won't turn up.
yeah. Or if they do, they won't really engage with it.
Yeah, they won't want to
Although I
be
do,
there. Yeah,
there is a bit of me that thinks, well, if that's the way to at least give them some information that they wouldn't have had before, then at least they've got something. And if they never do anything with it and take it away, at least they've moved a little tiny steplet on the journey. But no, what some of the other things that we do at Brown Jacobson that do seem to work really well are what we call courageous conversations.
yeah,
So we will, through they're mainly started by, or the idea is started by one of our D&I communities, but actually sometimes it's somewhat it's another colleague who doesn't necessarily join a group regularly, but has a particular interest. And then they're on Teams. It's normally over lunchtime. It's an hour, and we ask. When I say we, our D&I advisor sort of works with the different groups, and she will get a group of people who all have particular stories about a particular topic, and they will share those stories very courageously a lot of the time, hence the name. You know, it's quite personal stories that are being shared. And then there's not a lot of time for interactive discussion because it's more about listening to those experiences, and then so the conversation is between the people who've been asked to sort of share their stories. Quite a lot of times people put a lot of things, a lot of comments in the chat about their own experiences and how similar or different they are, but you know how sort of how kind of interesting they're finding it. And it has just been a really interesting way of people learning more about colleagues and their different experiences. And you know, I can think of one we did sort of 2 years ago for around about International Men's Day, and it was three of our male colleagues who all have actually very big and quite challenging caring responsibilities at home. And sort of breaking down some of the myths that it's always the women and the mums that sort of take on these caring roles, and just hearing about how much more was going on in their lives that people may not have realised was fascinating. And then I think we're going to do one hopefully kind of in the early summer around fertility, and actually the original request has come from a colleague who doesn't regularly join our working families group, but contacted a few of us in that group and said, oh, you know, I'd really like to be able to sort of, you know, look at how the firm addresses fertility, what our policies are, and sort of conversations around it. So, and that one for me is a really good example of where we can be very intersectional as well, because yes, fertility affects women in terms of wanting to have children. So it's kind of part of our gender and our families group, but also fertility treatment is a big thing for gay women. So that, you know, that's how you have to make it, you know, make a family if you want to, unless you want to adopt. So it's a really interesting topic that kind of brings a lot of different people together as well. So our D&I advisor Maria does an amazing job of managing these and sort of having them quite regularly actually, and bringing the right people together. But they have, over the last kind of 2 years, have just, I think, given so many insights into different colleagues' lives, and have allowed for a lot of understanding to happen.
All of that says that if you want to do work within your organization, which maybe is formal or even more informal, you should think about the fact that humans are naturally curious and naturally inclined to listen to other people's stories and find something in them. And it sounds like you guys have found different ways of doing that within your organizations, and those are the things which really work.
There's nothing more powerful than a story, for sure.
So the next thing that I wanted to come to was around what kind of concerns people might have. Thinking about being an ally or allyship, some of it will involve listening, learning, some of those bits that we've touched on, but some of it might involve saying something, doing something, speaking out about something, trying to challenge something, trying to change something. And I can imagine that a lot of people might feel nervous around that, or there may be things that would stop people from getting involved or becoming an active ally. What have you seen in terms of what people's sort of drawbacks or fears might be?
I think exactly that, Anna. People are frightened, aren't they? The people are frightened that they're going to say the wrong thing, or that they don't have an answer if they're asked, an opinion, or what would you do if you were me? How would you? So, and that's okay. Sounds trite, doesn't it? But it's actually okay to say the wrong thing, and you can't practice these things, can you? You can't practice conversations. You can teach people, but around allyship, I think it's okay that people should understand. Well, the education for me around allyship, it's okay not to have the answer. And it's okay to say the wrong thing, as long as you're humble about it and you're curious and you listen and all those, and you're authentic. You've got to have some skin in the game, haven't you, to be an ally? That's the point. And so being brave about it would be how I would answer your question.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it is about that those fear factors and not wanting to say or do the wrong thing. I think there are a smaller number of people who I think don't want the status quo to change, and actually they are interested in being an ally on one level, but they recognize that by bringing more voices into a conversation or by looking at something from a different perspective, it may mean that they have to do things differently in a way that is uncomfortable for them. So I'd originally written down the word that they feel threatened, and that's maybe too strong a word, but I think there's definitely something about people who at the moment are in the most comfortable positions in terms of the status quo actually worrying about the unknown consequences of being an ally. And I think that's a small number of people, but I find it, and this is not just in work actually. I find this in other areas of life as well. And for example, I regularly go to church, and some of the older people at church who just like church the way it's always been, don't necessarily want to think about bringing in different types of music or different activities that will be for a broader congregation. So I think there's also something about that as well, and keeping things as they are.
Yeah, I think that fear and the lack of knowledge is completely the foundation of why people don't get involved. I think also people don't know how to get involved. And I think that's why the focus of this podcast, where we're talking about what tangible actions you can take, is really positive. I think what we saw a lot with the movement from talking about racism to talking about anti-racism, for example, really emphasize that fact that you actually have to do something. You can't just not be racist. You actually have to do something to make sure you're changing what's happening around you. So I think, yeah, giving people the tools and knowledge for how to actually make a difference is so important. So within the House of Commons, we've taken a really tailored approach to trying to deliver our strategy, trying to get people to be allies for the people in our organisation. So we've given teams supported teams to create their own action plans from the strategy, and then narrowing it down one further from that, we've got individuals to pledge to something they can do. So I think that sort of supporting people to actually see the practical differences they can make is really important. And I think in the workplace, we have an amazing opportunity to do that, where there's budget for training and things like that. It's important that we use that and help people to see where they can make a tangible difference.
Yeah. And that leads me nicely to the last thing that I really wanted to discuss with you, which was, we've talked about why we would do it, how we might do it, and the kinds of things that people might do within their organization or individually. But I wanted you to share what your thoughts are about how somebody becomes a confident ally, because that is the title of the podcast.
I think there is a role here for the leadership of an organization to allow people to be a confident ally. So the business creating an atmosphere, as the word was used earlier, a sense of belonging, so that individuals then feel that they can step forward and be a confident ally. But my other reflection would be on what Katie said very near the beginning, which is you don't have to be a loud ally, or certainly not all the time. So if you're not somebody, if one of your fears, like maybe of being an ally, is that you need to speak up a lot, or you need to be constantly doing or saying things, then actually some of it is just holding that space for somebody else to say something, and it's time maybe, and it's being confident about saying what you're using your time for, rather than anything else. Is saying, I'm going to spend this hour listening to this courageous conversation, or I'm going to spend this hour, or half an hour having a coffee with a colleague that I don't know, to learn about them. So yeah, I think you can be a confident ally in different ways, but I do think it is incumbent on an organisation to engender that feeling of being able to be one.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you said there, Anya. I think there are so many things that people can do in the context of an organization that suit them if they're introverts and don't, or if they do have that fear. Things like if you have inclusion analyses or equality impact assessment, whatever you call them, you could be getting involved in that in the background. You can do the admin work that's required for a workplace equality network. You could recommend jobs or development courses to different people. There's so many things that you can do that are practical, tangible actions of an ally that don't require you to be the person who's standing up in front of everybody giving a speech or writing something. There really is a role for everybody within their comfort zone. But it is always good to challenge yourself and slightly go out of your comfort zone, of course. But there's a place for everyone with the skills that they bring to the work to become an ally.
I don't have anything to add to that. all said. But it's interesting, isn't it? People are often surprised if they say to, again, in sort of, our world in the legal sector, an associate says to the partner in the room, I'm going to have coffee with a colleague. Most partners will say, good for you. Who are you seeing? Oh, I'm seeing this person. It's about asking the question and being courageous to actually seek time to do it, because it just makes for a better workplace, which is where we started, isn't it, this conversation? So it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah. And it also strikes me from that actually we may not always feel confident about the actions that we take as an ally. And maybe that's okay as well, because sometimes we're going to be coming up against different ideas and different perceptions and different ways of thinking or different ways of doing things. And, maybe we can't always be confident when we're challenging those, or we're thinking about those, or we're trying to do something slightly differently. And maybe that's okay too. Okay, thank you very much, Katie, Moira, and Anya, for joining us and for taking your time. We loved having you on the podcast. I'm sure that people are going to have loads of things to take away from the conversation. And it certainly made me think. I'm sure it'll make the listeners think too. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for asking us.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, real pleasure. Feel the fear and do it anyway, everyone.
Thank you for being with us and for listening to that interview and thinking about how you could become a more confident ally. It's certainly given me a lot of things to think about and some things that I'm going to commit to going forward. If you want to be in contact with any of our guests, all of their links to LinkedIn are in the show notes. Plus, if you want to come and coach or learn about how to build your confidence with me, there are links in the show notes that you can peruse and options for you to increase your confidence, whether that is you come and take the free quiz, which will tell you whether or not you're in a low confidence cycle and help you to identify things that you can do straight away to start building your professional confidence, or whether that is coming to work with me one-on-one as your coach. So that's all we have for you today, and I'll see you in next week's episode. Bye.